My name is Seraphina Walsh, and I'm 28 years old. Last Sunday, during what should have been a routine family brunch, my mother made her usual passive-aggressive comment about my single status while gushing over my younger sister's upcoming wedding. But this time I didn't deflect or change the subject like I always did. Instead, I looked her straight in the eye and said, "It already happened." The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was the sound of 15 years of carefully constructed lies finally cracking apart, revealing a family secret that would destroy everything we thought we knew about loyalty, love, and the true meaning of betrayal. Hey, everyone. Before we dive into this absolutely wild family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Are you team older sister or team family loyalty? Make sure to hit that like button if you're ready for some serious family. Revenge served ice cold. And don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you won't want to miss how this story unfolds. The betrayal I'm about to share will make you question everything you thought you knew about family bonds. To understand how we got here, I need to take you back 15 years to when I was 13 and my world fell apart in the most devastating way possible. My parents, Richard and Margaret Walsh, were the kind of couple that other families envied. Dad was a successful corporate lawyer, Mom was the quintessential suburban housewife who volunteered at every charity event and hosted the most elaborate dinner parties in our Connecticut neighborhood. We lived in a sprawling colonial house with perfectly manicured lawns, and from the outside, we were the American dream personified. But behind closed doors, our family had a different story entirely. My parents' marriage was built on appearances rather than genuine connection, and I learned this lesson in the most brutal way imaginable when I accidentally discovered my father's affair with his secretary, Linda Morrison. I'll never forget that Tuesday afternoon when I came home early from school with strep throat, expecting to find comfort and maybe some homemade soup from Mom. Instead, I found my father in their bedroom with a woman who definitely wasn't my mother, engaged in activities that my 13-year-old mind struggled to process. The betrayal cut deeper than just discovering adultery. What destroyed me wasn't just seeing my father cheat, it was watching him, notice me standing frozen in the doorway, watching him quickly whisper something to Linda, and then watching both of them laugh quietly as if my presence was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. That laugh haunted me for years. It was the sound of someone who didn't care that they'd just shattered their daughter's entire understanding of family, love, and trust. When I confronted my father later that evening, his response was even more devastating than the initial discovery. He didn't deny what I'd seen, didn't apologize, didn't show even a flicker of remorse. Instead, he sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared countless family dinners, and explained the situation with the cold efficiency of a business transaction. He told me that adult relationships were complicated, that what I'd witnessed was simply him finding happiness that he couldn't find with my mother, and that if I truly loved our family, I would understand that some secrets were meant to be kept for the greater good. But the real manipulation came next. With the calculating precision that had made him successful in corporate law, Dad explained that revealing his affair would destroy not just our family's reputation, but would specifically hurt Mom's mental health, which had been fragile since her mother's death the previous year. He painted a picture of Mom becoming completely devastated, potentially having a breakdown, losing the house, forcing us to move away from everything we'd ever known. He made it clear that the responsibility for our family's happiness or destruction rested entirely on my shoulders. The pressure was suffocating. Here I was, barely a teenager, being asked to carry the weight of adult secrets that I never should have been burdened with. Dad sweetened the manipulation by promising that this arrangement was temporary, that he was working on fixing things with Mom, and that my maturity in handling this situation proved how special and trustworthy I was compared to other kids my age. He made me feel simultaneously powerful and trapped, chosen and abandoned. The worst part was how seamlessly life continued after that conversation. Dad kept coming home for dinner, kept attending my school events, kept playing the role of devoted husband and father while maintaining his double life. Meanwhile, I became an unwilling accomplice in my own family's deception. Every family photo felt like a lie. Every "I love you" from dad felt hollow. And every moment of mom's genuine happiness felt like a knife twisting in my chest because I knew it was built on foundations of sand. As months turned into years, the secret became a living thing inside me, growing heavier and more toxic with each passing day. I watched Mom plan elaborate anniversary celebrations for her, and Dad watched her beam with pride when talking about their rock-solid marriage to her friends, watched her defend Dad's increasingly frequent business trips, and late nights at the office. The innocence of my 13-year-old self died completely during those years, replaced by a cynical understanding of how easily adults could lie, manipulate, and justify their selfish choices. The affair continued throughout my high school years, with Dad becoming increasingly bold and careless about his deception. He started taking Linda on business trips, spending entire weekends away, and even had the audacity to bring her to company functions where Mom would sometimes accompany him, introducing Linda as just a colleague while they exchanged meaningful glances that made my stomach turn. I felt like I was living in an alternate reality where everyone around me was acting out scripts for a play that only I could see was completely fabricated. By the time I graduated high school, the secret had fundamentally changed who I was as a person. I'd become hypervigilant about lies and deception, unable to trust romantic relationships, because I'd seen firsthand how easily love could be faked and betrayed. I developed an almost pathological need for honesty and transparency in all my relationships, which ironically made dating incredibly difficult because most people weren't prepared for someone who demanded complete emotional authenticity from day one. The final straw came during my sophomore year of college, when Dad's carelessness finally caught up with him, but not in the way I'd expected. Mom didn't discover the affair through suspicious behavior or investigating his lies. Instead, she found out because Linda got pregnant and decided she was tired of being the other woman. She showed up at our house on a Saturday morning while I was home for winter break, 8 months pregnant, and demanding that Dad choose between his two families once and for all. I'll never forget watching Mom's face as Linda explained the situation with brutal honesty, describing intimate details about her relationship with Dad that no wife should ever have to hear. Mom turned to look at me during Linda's revelation, and I saw the exact moment when she realized that I'd known all along. The betrayal in her eyes wasn't just directed at Dad. It was directed at me too, and that look of devastation and disappointment became seared into my memory forever. The explosion that followed Linda's pregnancy announcement destroyed our family more completely than I'd ever imagined possible. Mom didn't just get angry, she had what could only be described as a complete psychological breakdown that lasted for months. She spent weeks refusing to leave her bedroom, alternating between rage-filled screaming sessions and catatonic silence that was somehow even more terrifying. Dad moved out immediately, not even bothering to maintain the pretense of trying to save his marriage, and within 6 months, he was living with Linda and preparing to welcome his new child. But the worst part of the entire disaster was how Mom directed her fury at me. In her mind, I hadn't just been an innocent victim forced to keep an adult secret, I'd been an active participant in her humiliation. She accused me of choosing Dad's side, of being complicit in making her look foolish in front of friends and family, of robbing her of years where she could have made different choices if she'd known the truth. The woman who had raised me, who had bandaged my scraped knees and celebrated my achievements, now looked at me with a combination of hurt and disgust that cut deeper than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. My younger sister, Emma, who was only 8 when everything imploded, became Mom's sole source of comfort and validation. Emma had been too young to understand the adult dynamics that had been suffocating our household, and Mom clung to her innocence like a lifeline. In Mom's restructured narrative, Emma represented purity and loyalty, while I represented deception and betrayal. The favoritism that emerged wasn't subtle, it was blatant and painful, a constant reminder that I'd somehow become the villain in my own family's story, despite being a victim myself. The summer before my junior year of college became a turning point in ways I never could have anticipated. I was working as a camp counselor in upstate New York, trying to escape the toxic atmosphere at home and figure out how to rebuild my life from the wreckage of my family's collapse. It was there that I met Marcus Chen, a fellow counselor who was studying environmental law at Columbia. Marcus was everything my father wasn't: genuinely kind, emotionally honest, and incapable of the manipulative games that had defined my understanding of adult relationships. Our connection was immediate and intense, built on late-night conversations about books, dreams, and our shared commitment to working with underprivileged kids at the camp. Marcus had grown up in foster care after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12, and he understood trauma and family dysfunction in ways that most people our age couldn't comprehend. He didn't judge me for carrying my family's secrets, didn't try to fix me or minimize my pain. And most importantly, he proved, through consistent actions, that trust could be rebuilt, even after it had been completely shattered. By the end of that summer, I knew I was in love with Marcus in a way that felt completely different from the cautious, guarded relationships I'd attempted during my first 2 years of college. When he proposed to me on the last night of camp, a simple, heartfelt proposal under the stars by the lake where we'd spent countless hours talking, I said yes, without a moment's hesitation. We both understood that our relationship was moving quickly by conventional standards, but we also understood that when you've experienced real loss and betrayal, you recognize genuine love when it appears in your life. The decision to get married immediately, rather than waiting for a traditional wedding, came from a combination of practical and emotional factors. Marcus was starting his final year of law school. I was transferring to Columbia to finish my social work degree, and we both craved the stability and commitment that marriage represented after years of uncertainty in our respective family situations. More importantly, we wanted our wedding to be about us and our love, not about managing family drama or meeting other people's expectations about what our special day should look like. We were married by a justice of the peace in a simple ceremony at the courthouse in Marcus's hometown, with only his foster parents and my college roommate as witnesses. I wore a simple white sundress that I'd bought the day before Marcus wore his only suit, and we exchanged vows that we'd written ourselves, promising to be honest with each other, even when the truth was difficult, to support each other's dreams, even when they were scary, and to create the kind of family that we'd both been searching for our entire lives. The decision not to tell my family about the wedding wasn't made out of spite or revenge, it was made out of self-preservation. I knew that involving Mom and Emma would turn our special day into another opportunity for drama and recrimination. Mom would have demanded explanations about why we were rushing, would have insisted on planning elaborate celebrations that would showcase her role as mother of the bride, and would have found ways to make the entire experience about her feelings and her needs rather than celebrating Marcus and me. Instead, Marcus and I created our own tradition. We spent our honeymoon on a camping trip through national parks, just the two of us, with backpacks and a tent, talking about our hopes for the future and planning the kind of life we wanted to build together. We talked about careers focused on helping people rather than accumulating wealth, about possibly adopting children who needed families, about creating a home environment built on honesty and mutual respect rather than appearances and social friend. Expectations. When we returned from our honeymoon and I went back to school, I made a conscious decision to maintain minimal contact with my family while Marcus and I established our life together. I didn't explicitly lie about being married, but I also didn't volunteer the information during our occasional phone calls. Mom was so wrapped up in her own healing process and her intensified relationship with Emma that she rarely asked detailed questions about my personal life anyway. The years that followed were the happiest of my life up to that point. Marcus and I graduated from our respective programs, found jobs in social services that felt meaningful and fulfilling, and bought a small house in a diverse neighborhood where we felt like we belonged. We hosted dinner parties for friends, volunteered together at local nonprofits, and gradually built the kind of community and chosen family that neither of us had experienced growing up. Meanwhile, my relationship with my biological family remained distant but civil. Emma grew into a teenager who seemed to thrive under Mom's undivided attention, excelling in school and activities while developing into the kind of confident, accomplished young woman that Mom could showcase proudly to her social circle. As the years passed, the contrast between my life and the life my family believed I was living became increasingly stark. While Marcus and I were building a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared values, Mom was crafting an entirely different narrative about my existence. In her version of reality, I was a struggling, lonely woman who had never quite recovered from the trauma of Dad's affair, someone to be pitied rather than celebrated. This narrative served multiple purposes for Mom. It justified her decision to focus all her emotional energy on Emma, and it reinforced her belief that she was the primary victim in our family's collapse. Emma, meanwhile, was flourishing in ways that seemed almost calculated to highlight everything I supposedly lacked. She was accepted to Stanford with a full academic scholarship where she studied international business and graduated summa cum laude. During her junior year, she met Bradley Whitman, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, at a networking event for young professionals. Their relationship moved forward with the kind of fairy tale perfection that seemed designed for Mom's social media accounts and dinner party conversations. Bradley was everything that Mom had probably hoped I would find: wealthy, well-connected, conventionally handsome, and most importantly, eager to be integrated into our family's social circle. He treated Mom like a beloved future mother-in-law from their very first meeting, bringing her expensive flowers, asking thoughtful questions about her charity work, and making it clear that he understood the importance of family, traditions, and appearances. Within 2 years, he proposed to Emma with a ring that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and immediately began planning the kind of elaborate wedding that Mom had dreamed about since Emma was a little girl. The engagement announcement was a masterclass in social media perfection. Professional photos of Emma and Bradley in coordinated outfits posed in front of Bradley's family's estate with captions about true love, blessed beginnings, and grateful hearts. Mom shared every single photo with lengthy commentary about her joy in watching her youngest daughter find such happiness, making sure to mention Bradley's family connections and the prestigious venues they were considering for the day: wedding celebration. Meanwhile, my own life continued to unfold in quiet, meaningful ways that never made it into Mom's social media narrative. Marcus completed his master's degree in environmental law and landed a position with a nonprofit organization focused on protecting water rights for indigenous communities. I advanced in my career as a social worker specializing in family reunification services for children who had been removed from their homes due to abuse or neglect. We bought a larger house with enough space for the children we hoped to adopt, and spent our weekends working in the garden, hosting friends for casual dinners, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. Our marriage deepened and strengthened with each passing year, built on the kind of daily intimacies and small kindnesses that don't translate well to social media, but create the foundation for lasting happiness. Marcus knew exactly how I liked my coffee in the morning. I knew when he needed space to process difficult cases at work, and we had developed our own language of inside jokes, meaningful glances, and comfortable silences that spoke to the depth of our connection. But the decision to keep our marriage private began to feel more complicated as Emma's wedding planning intensified. Mom would call me periodically with updates about venue selections, dress fittings, and catering decisions, always with an undertone that suggested I should be taking notes for my own hypothetical future wedding. She would ask pointed questions about my dating life, make comments about how I needed to start putting myself out there more seriously, and occasionally suggest that she could set me up with sons of her friends who were still single. The most painful part of these conversations wasn't Mom's obvious favoritism or her assumptions about my romantic failures. It was the realization that she genuinely knew nothing about who I had become or what brought meaning to my life. She had no idea about my professional accomplishments, my marriage to Marcus, or the rich community of friends and chosen family that we had built together. In her mind, I was still the damaged 13-year-old who had been complicit in Dad's affair, frozen in time and unable to move forward into genuine happiness. Emma's behavior during this period was more complex and harder to categorize. On the surface, she maintained the role of loving younger sister, calling me occasionally to share wedding details and asking for my opinions on various decisions. But there was an underlying current of competitiveness and superiority that became increasingly obvious as the wedding date approached. She would casually mention the cost of various wedding elements, describe the guest list full of celebrities and business moguls, and make sure to emphasize how blessed she felt to have found someone who could provide such a beautiful life for her. The turning point came during Emma's bachelorette party weekend in Napa Valley, an extravaganza that Mom had planned and funded with characteristic attention to luxury and social media appeal. I was invited somewhat reluctantly and spent 3 days watching Emma hold court among her sorority sisters and Bradley's female relatives, while Mom documented every moment for her various social media accounts. The weekend was filled with spa treatments, wine tastings, and elaborate dinners at restaurants where the cost of a single meal exceeded my monthly grocery budget. During one particularly revealing conversation on the final night of the weekend, Emma made a comment that crystallized everything I had been feeling about our family dynamic. We were sitting by the pool at the resort, most of the other women had gone to bed, and Emma was in that particular state of wine-induced honesty that sometimes emerges during milestone celebrations. She started talking about how grateful she was for the life she was building with Bradley, how different her path had been from mine, and how she sometimes felt sorry for me because I had never learned how to move past Dad's betrayal. But then she said something that revealed the depth of her self-centeredness and lack of genuine empathy. She told me that she was glad our family had gone through the trauma of Dad's affair because it had taught her important lessons about choosing the right kind of man and the importance of protecting herself emotionally. She said that watching Mom's pain had motivated her to be more careful about trust and commitment, and that seeing my ongoing struggles with relationships had shown her what she didn't want her own life to look like. The casual cruelty of reducing our family's trauma to life lessons for her benefit was breathtaking. Emma had reframed our collective pain as character-building experiences that had ultimately served her personal growth with no apparent recognition that Dad's affair had created different kinds of damage for different people, or that her protected position as the youngest child had shielded her from the worst of the psychological fallout. That weekend in Napa became the catalyst for my decision to finally tell the truth about my marriage. Not because I wanted to hurt Emma or steal attention from her wedding, but because I realized that continuing to hide my happiness was allowing my family to maintain a fundamentally false narrative about who I was and what my life looked like. I deserved to have my marriage acknowledged and celebrated. Marcus deserved to be recognized as part of our family and our relationship, deserved to exist in the light rather than in the shadows of other people's assumptions and projections. The week before Emma's wedding, I made a decision that would change everything. I had spent 15 years carrying other people's secrets and protecting other people's feelings at the expense of my own truth. As I watched Mom post daily updates about last-minute wedding preparations and Emma's interviews with local society magazines about her fairy tale romance, I realized that my silence had become complicity in erasing my own life and happiness. Marcus and I had been married for 7 years at this point. 7 years of genuine partnership, shared dreams, professional achievements, and quiet contentment that deserved recognition. We had weathered challenges that would have broken weaker relationships. Marcus's bout with cancer during his second year of law practice, my struggles with anxiety and trust issues stemming from childhood trauma, the financial stress of my graduate school loans, and the heartbreak of 3 miscarriages before we decided to focus on adoption instead of biological children. Through all of these experiences, Marcus had been everything a partner should be. Supportive without being patronizing, honest without being cruel, present without being suffocating. He had earned the right to be acknowledged as my husband and I had earned the right to have my marriage celebrated rather than hidden. The decision to reveal our secret at Emma's wedding wasn't motivated by vindictiveness, but by a fundamental need for honesty and recognition that I could no longer suppress. The wedding itself was everything Mom had dreamed of and more. The ceremony was held at Bradley's family estate, a sprawling property in the Hamptons that looked like something out of Architectural Digest. 200 guests attended, including local politicians, business leaders, and society figures, whose presence would provide Mom with social media content for months to come. Emma looked stunning in a custom Vera Wang gown that had required multiple fittings and cost more than my annual salary, while Bradley wore a bespoke tuxedo and looked appropriately handsome and devoted. I had carefully planned my revelation for maximum impact while minimizing disruption to the actual ceremony. I waited until the reception was in full swing after the formal toasts had been completed and the dancing had begun. Mom was holding court at a table of her closest friends, regaling them with stories about Emma's engagement and their mother-daughter bonding during the wedding planning process. The conversation naturally turned to me, with Mom explaining to the group how worried she was about my continued single status and how she hoped that attending Emma's beautiful wedding might inspire me to be more open to finding love. That's when I decided it was time. I approached the table with Marcus at my side. Marcus, who had been attending the wedding as my friend, according to the official narrative, but who had been quietly charming everyone he met with his genuine warmth and interesting conversation. I waited for a natural pause in Mom's monologue, and then I spoke the words that I had been rehearsing for weeks. "Actually, Mom, I've been meaning to tell you something important about my romantic life," I said, making sure my voice was loud enough for the entire table to hear, but not so loud as to disrupt other conversations. "I'd like you all to meet my husband, Marcus Chen. We've been married for 7 years now, and I couldn't be happier with the life we've built together." The silence that followed was immediate and complete. Mom's face went through several distinct expressions, in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, realization, and then something that could only be described as pure fury. Her friends looked back and forth between us, clearly trying to process this unexpected information and figure out how to respond appropriately. Marcus, bless him, simply smiled warmly and extended his hand to Mom, introducing himself as if this were a perfectly normal family introduction rather than the detonation of a 7-year secret. 7 years. Mom repeated, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying more impact than if she had been shouting. "You've been married for 7 years, and you never told us." The conversation that followed was conducted in those intense, quiet tones that families use when they're having major confrontations in public spaces. Mom demanded explanations, accused me of deliberately humiliating her in front of her friends, and questioned why I would choose Emma's wedding day to make such an announcement. Her friends gradually excused themselves from the table, clearly recognizing that they were witnessing intimate family drama that they had no business observing. But I was prepared for Mom's reaction, and I had my responses ready. I explained calmly that I had never intended to keep my marriage secret permanently, but that the family's reaction to Dad's affair had created an environment where I didn't feel safe sharing personal information. I pointed out that Mom had never asked direct questions about my romantic life beyond general inquiries about dating, and that I had been waiting for the right time to introduce Marcus properly to the family. Most importantly, I made it clear that choosing Emma's wedding day for this revelation wasn't intended to upstage the bride, but rather to celebrate love and commitment in all its forms. I explained that watching Emma and Bradley exchange vows had reminded me how beautiful it was to have your love publicly acknowledged and celebrated, and that I had realized I wanted that same recognition for my own marriage. Emma's reaction was perhaps even more telling than Mom's. While Mom was clearly angry about being caught off guard and made to look foolish in front of her friends, Emma seemed genuinely confused about why my marriage was relevant to her special day. She approached our table during the confrontation and actually said, "Seraphina, this is really not the time or place for your announcements. Today is supposed to be about Bradley and me." That response revealed everything I needed to know about how successfully Mom had raised Emma to view herself as the center of the family universe. In Emma's mind, my 7-year marriage was nothing more than an inappropriate attention-seeking gesture designed to steal focus from her wedding day. She couldn't conceive of the possibility that my marriage was significant in its own right, or that my decision to reveal it stemmed from genuine emotional needs rather than jealousy of her moment in the spotlight. The remainder of the reception passed in a haze of whispered conversations, curious glances, and awkward family photos where everyone tried to pretend that nothing unusual had happened. Marcus handled the entire situation with grace and dignity, making conversation with relatives who suddenly had to recalibrate their entire understanding of my life, and supporting me emotionally while I navigated the fallout from my decision. By the end of the evening, word had spread throughout the reception that the bride's older sister had been secretly married for years, and I could see the calculation in people's eyes as they tried to figure out why such a secret had been necessary, and what it revealed about our family dynamics. The 24 hours following Emma's wedding were unlike anything I had ever experienced in terms of family drama and emotional intensity. Mom didn't speak to me for the rest of the reception or during the farewell brunch the following morning, but her silence was somehow more powerful than any angry confrontation could have been. She moved through both events with the rigid composure of someone who is barely containing explosive emotions, accepting congratulations on Emma's beautiful wedding while clearly seething about my revelation. Emma's reaction evolved from initial confusion to genuine anger as she began to understand the implications of what had happened. The morning after her wedding, she called me at my hotel room and demanded a private conversation that quickly escalated into the most honest exchange we'd ever had as adults. She accused me of deliberately sabotaging her special day, of being jealous of her happiness, and of using her wedding as a platform for my own selfish needs. But more revealing than her anger was her complete inability to understand why I had felt the need to keep my marriage secret in the first place. When I tried to explain the family dynamics that had led to my decision, Emma dismissed my concerns as oversensitivity and victim mentality. In her version of our family history, Dad's affair had been an unfortunate but brief disruption that everyone had moved past successfully, and my ongoing issues with trust and honesty were character flaws rather than reasonable responses to genuine trauma. The conversation became particularly heated when Emma accused me of lying by omission for 7 years, claiming that my deception had been just as harmful as Dad's affair. She couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge the fundamental difference between keeping a secret about something that was hurting other people versus keeping a secret about something that was bringing joy and stability to my own life. In Emma's mind, any deviation from complete transparency was equivalent to betrayal, regardless of the motivations or circumstances involved. What struck me most about Emma's response was how it revealed the depth of her self-centeredness and her inability to see situations from perspectives other than her own. She repeatedly brought the conversation back to how my revelation had affected her wedding day experience, how it had made her feel upstaged and embarrassed, and how it had forced her to answer questions from relatives and friends about family dynamics that she didn't fully understand herself. When I pointed out that I had waited until after the ceremony and formal reception activities were complete before making my announcement, Emma dismissed this consideration as inadequate. In her mind, her entire wedding weekend should have been sacred space, where nothing could happen that might shift attention away from her and Bradley even momentarily. The idea that other family members might have their own significant life experiences that deserved acknowledgement seemed genuinely foreign to her. Mom's response when it finally came was even more devastating than Emma's anger. 3 days after the wedding, she called me and delivered what amounted to an ultimatum disguised as a heartbroken mother's plea. She told me that my decision to reveal my marriage at Emma's wedding had been the final proof that I cared more about myself than about family harmony, and that she could no longer trust me to prioritize the family's well-being over my own agenda. But the real manipulation came when Mom started talking about Dad's affair and how my role in keeping that secret had supposedly prepared me for a lifetime of deception and family betrayal. She claimed that my marriage to Marcus without family involvement was just another example of my inability to value family relationships appropriately, and that my pattern of secrecy was becoming destructive to everyone around me. The most painful part of Mom's response was how she completely reframed my marriage as something selfish and hurtful rather than something beautiful and worth celebrating. Instead of expressing joy about my happiness, or curiosity about Marcus and our life together, she focused exclusively on how my choices had affected her and Emma. She made it clear that she viewed my 7-year marriage as 7 years of deliberate deception rather than 7 years of building a loving partnership that I had protected from family drama. The ultimatum itself was delivered with characteristic passive-aggressive precision. Mom told me that she needed time and space to process what had happened and that she couldn't continue having regular contact with me while she was working through her feelings of betrayal and disappointment. She suggested that perhaps we should limit our communication to major holidays and family emergencies until I could demonstrate that I was ready to prioritize family relationships appropriately. In practical terms, this meant that I was being cut off from regular family contact unless I was willing to apologize for my marriage, explain why I had kept it secret, and presumably submit to Mom's expectations about how my relationship with Marcus should proceed going forward. The message was clear: I could be part of the family if I was willing to accept their judgment and control over my personal life, but my independence and self-determination were not welcome. Marcus witnessed most of these family confrontations either directly or through their aftermath, and his response provided a stark contrast to my family's reactions. Instead of making the situation about himself or his feelings, he focused entirely on supporting me emotionally while I navigated these difficult conversations. He never suggested that I should apologize for protecting our marriage from family drama, never questioned my decisions about when and how to reveal our relationship, and never made me feel guilty for the complications that our secret had created. Most importantly, Marcus helped me recognize that the family's response to learning about our marriage was actually validation that my instincts about keeping it private had been correct. Their immediate focus on how my happiness affected them rather than celebration of my happiness itself proved that involving them earlier would have turned our wedding and early marriage into opportunities for drama and manipulation rather than joy and celebration. The week following Emma's wedding became a turning point where I had to choose between continuing to manage my family's emotions at the expense of my own well-being or accepting that my relationship with them might need to change, fundamentally, in order for me to maintain my mental health and protect my marriage. For the first time in my life, I chose myself and my chosen family over the biological family that had never quite learned how to love me without conditions. 6 months after Emma's wedding, the true nature of my family's character revealed itself in ways that provided the most satisfying vindication I could have imagined. The fairy tale marriage that had been celebrated with such fanfare began to show cracks that even Mom's carefully curated social media presence couldn't hide completely. Bradley, it turned out, had some very traditional ideas about marriage that Emma hadn't fully understood during their courtship period. The first signs of trouble emerged when Emma started making subtle complaints about Bradley's expectations regarding her career and social activities. The international business degree that she had worked so hard to earn suddenly became less relevant when Bradley made it clear that he expected his wife to focus on supporting his career advancement and managing their social obligations, rather than pursuing her own professional ambitions. The confident, accomplished young woman who had graduated summa cum laude found herself relegated to the role of beautiful accessory at business dinners and charity galas. But the real revelation came when Emma discovered that Bradley had been having an affair with his personal assistant, a situation that felt like the most poetic justice imaginable given our family history. The irony was so perfect, it almost seemed scripted. The daughter who had benefited from Mom's protection and favoritism, who had judged me harshly for my response to Dad's betrayal, was now experiencing the same devastating discovery of marital infidelity that had shaped my adolescence. Emma's response to Bradley's affair was everything that Mom had criticized me for, being emotional, messy, and unwilling to quietly accept betrayal for the sake of maintaining appearances. She moved back in with Mom, immediately filed for divorce despite the social embarrassment it would cause, and made it clear that she had no intention of protecting Bradley's reputation or their family's business. Relationships. The composed, mature young woman who had lectured me about moving past trauma was replaced by someone who understood viscerally why trust once broken could never be fully repaired. Mom's reaction to Emma's crisis was equally revealing. The woman who had spent years criticizing my inability to move past Dad's affair suddenly became the most supportive advocate for Emma's right to feel betrayed and angry about marital infidelity. She provided endless emotional support, helped fund Emma's divorce proceedings, and made it clear that Emma's well-being was more important than any social embarrassment the divorce might cause. The double standard was so obvious it would have been laughable if it hadn't been so painful to witness. When I was 13 and traumatized by Dad's affair, I was expected to keep secrets and protect the family's stability. When Emma was 26 and discovered her husband's affair, she was entitled to unlimited support and understanding for her emotional response. The favoritism that had shaped our childhood continued to define our adult relationship, even in circumstances that should have created empathy and common ground between us. The vindication became complete when Emma reached out to me during her divorce proceedings, clearly hoping for sisterly support and understanding from someone who had experienced similar betrayal. But the conversation revealed how little she had learned about empathy and perspective-taking even in the midst of her own crisis. She wanted comfort and validation for her pain, but she still couldn't acknowledge the pain she had dismissed when it belonged to someone else. When I tried to point out the parallels between our experiences and suggest that perhaps she could now understand why Dad's affair had been so traumatic for me, Emma became defensive and insisted that the situations were completely different. In her mind, her marriage to Bradley had been real and legitimate in ways that apparently Dad's marriage to Mom had not been, and her betrayal was therefore more significant and deserving of support than mine had been. The conversation ended with Emma accusing me of being unsympathetic and using her crisis as an opportunity to relitigate old family grievances. She couldn't understand that I was offering genuine empathy based on shared experience, not gloating about her misfortune. Even in her lowest moment, Emma remained incapable of seeing beyond her own perspective or acknowledging that other people's pain might be as valid and significant as her own. Meanwhile, Marcus and I continued building the life we had always envisioned together. We finalized the adoption of two siblings, Maya and David, ages 8 and 6, who had been waiting for a permanent family after their biological parents' rights were terminated due to severe neglect and abuse. The process had taken nearly 2 years of home studies, background checks, and careful matching, but bringing Maya and David home felt like the completion of our family in ways that we had dreamed about since our early marriage. Our children thrived in an environment built on honesty, consistency, and unconditional love. Maya, who had been selectively mute when she first came to us, began talking freely about her experiences and feelings. David, who had struggled with behavioral problems in previous placements, responded beautifully to clear boundaries combined with genuine affection and security. Watching them heal and grow reinforced every decision Marcus and I had made about prioritizing emotional health over appearances and chosen family over biological obligation. The contrast between our family life and the ongoing drama in my biological family became increasingly stark as time passed. While Mom and Emma dealt with divorce proceedings, custody battles, and social embarrassment, Marcus and I focused on creating holiday traditions, supporting our children's educational and emotional development, and building community. Connections that enriched all of our lives. We hosted Thanksgiving dinner for friends whose biological families were scattered or estranged. Created a chosen family of people who supported each other through genuine affection rather than obligation. Our dinner table was filled with social workers, teachers, other adoptive parents, and friends from various backgrounds who shared our values about kindness, honesty, and mutual support. Looking back now, I can see that my decision to reveal my marriage at Emma's wedding wasn't just about demanding recognition for my relationship. It was about refusing to continue participating in a family dynamic that required me to minimize my own happiness in order to protect other people's illusions and comfort. The 7 years of secrecy had served their purpose by allowing Marcus and me to build a strong foundation without interference. But the time had come to stop hiding our joy and success from people who had never learned how to celebrate, either appropriately. The karma that eventually caught up with my family wasn't something I orchestrated or wished for. It was simply the natural consequence of prioritizing appearances over authenticity, favoritism over fairness, and control over genuine love. Emma's experience with betrayal didn't teach her empathy for others who had suffered similarly. And Mom's response to Emma's crisis didn't lead to any acknowledgement of how she had failed me during my own trauma. But their inability to grow or change no longer defined my happiness or limited my potential. I had found my people in Marcus, Maya, and David, and in the community of friends and colleagues who celebrated our successes and supported us through challenges. The family I had created was everything the family I was born into had never managed to become: honest, supportive, and committed to each other's genuine well-being rather than the maintenance of false narratives. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your own happiness and managing your family's expectations? Sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the ones who struggle most to see us clearly or celebrate our authentic selves. If this story resonated with your own experiences with family drama, favoritism, or choosing your mental health over toxic relationships, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't support your happiness? What was the moment when you realized that biological family doesn't always mean unconditional love? Please hit that like button if you believe that chosen family can be just as meaningful as biological family. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about people who found the courage to prioritize their own well-being over other people's comfort. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect your happiness from people who don't know how to celebrate it appropriately. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community, where we can share difficult truths about family dynamics and personal growth. I hope that sharing my experience with family betrayal, hidden marriage, and ultimately finding my chosen family brings some insight or comfort to your own journey. Remember that you deserve relationships that celebrate your authentic self, rather than requiring you to minimize your joy for other people's comfort. Until next time, keep choosing authenticity over appearances and surrounding yourself with people who truly want the best for you.